My dad kicked me out so my golden child half-brother could move in, but 6 months later, they're begging me to lie to cover up his crime where they'll go to jail. Hey everyone, before we dive in, I have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and ensures you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. I'm male, turned 18 about 4 months ago, and my dad kicked me out 6 months back because my jerk half-brother Derek, 24M, decided that he was moving back here and didn't want to rent a place like a normal person. He wanted to live with my dad. For context, Derek is my dad's son from his first relationship, but Derek's mother and my dad broke up soon after he was born, so they didn't really have much of a relationship afterward. Derek is a lot closer to my dad than he is to his mother, so we spent a lot of time together growing up because he would come over more often than was legally required as per his custody arrangement. I'm pretty sure that he was supposed to spend half the month with my father, but I remember being around him all the time. Or maybe that was just my brain exaggerating things because I hated spending time with him, but my dad forced us together. I also know for a fact that he didn't like me much and saw me as a threat to him. My mother passed away a couple of years ago after a long battle with lung cancer, and that's when things started going downhill with me and my dad. Don't get me wrong, things had been bad between me and my dad ever since I was a kid. I guess my father didn't really want a kid like me, or maybe he didn't even want a kid at all. Whatever it was, he treated me weirdly when I was little. And it almost always felt like he didn't want me around most of the time. He would always be mad at me and yell at me for the smallest things. He would never show me any affection, and even when I tried to win him over, it would be met with nothing but coldness. But with Derek, he was a different person altogether. Whenever Derek would be around the house, he would suddenly turn into the best father in the world and do everything that I wanted him to do with me. He forced him and I to spend time together, even though both of us had made it very clear that we didn't like each other. Derek didn't like me because I was a threat, and I didn't like him because he would always bully me when I was a kid. He would always try his best to lock horns with me and push me around all the time just because he could. He knew that he would get away with it too, because my father would never say a word against him. Whenever I would complain to my dad about Derek being rough with me, he would tell me to suck it up and deal with it, because that's apparently how boys were supposed to play. And he didn't want me to grow up and be a pansy. And I thought that's what my father wanted from me, so eventually I learned to suck it up and just let it happen. I would never fight back because I didn't want to piss my dad off, and I knew that fighting with Derek was one sure-shot way of having him yell at me. It didn't even matter if Derek was screwing things up for me or not. If I fought with him, I was always the one in the wrong. My dad never cared about the story. Whatever happened, I was the bad guy. It was pretty obvious that he had a favorite, and it wasn't me. Not even for a second did he find it weird that Derek was picking on me, even though I was a full 6 years younger than him. Then slowly he started changing his ways of bullying me because physically hitting me wasn't cutting it anymore. He was also growing up. So when he started high school, he switched to bullying me with his friends instead. Before that, school had been my safe place because I was still in elementary school when he was in middle school. And we had different buildings, so he couldn't get to me there. But once I started middle school, we were in the same building, and he and his friends were ganging up on me and making fun of me all the time. They would even spread stupid, nasty rumors about me, like I was apparently mentally challenged, and all the seniors knew that I was Derek's idiotic little younger brother. I'm not even kidding, that's exactly what they used to call me. They would even call me slurs, and it really made things difficult for me because when kids start middle school, they start caring more about their reputation. So now, even the friends that I had from elementary school wouldn't speak to me because I was not cool enough to hang out with anyone. It wasn't until Derek graduated that I finally had the school to myself and could exist in peace. I did have a couple of friends, but most people just believed them, and I would let them get away with it because I was so exhausted from putting up a fight all the time that I couldn't even bear to argue. At home, things were just as bad as ever because Derek and my father would never pass up on an opportunity to put me down and make me feel like an idiot. And the funniest part was that I wasn't even an idiot. I had pretty decent grades, and I was great at science and stuff, but my dad and Derek didn't care about that. Derek was a football player, and the cherry on top of that, he was actually a pretty great student as well. So you guys can imagine how bad things must have been for me at home. Derek was everything that I was not: athletic, academically strong, and just the kind of son that my father had wanted. On the other hand, there was me, who was average in every sense of the word. They never missed an opportunity to remind me of just how insignificant and average I was. My mother tried to defend me most of the time, but my dad was a real sweet talker, and he would convince my mother that they were just messing around with me, and they didn't mean anything that they said. My mother was generally a nice and sweet person, but she was also really in love with my father, so she never saw him for what he truly was. She would try her best to defend me, and I appreciated her for it, but it didn't work because it wasn't enough. And my father, along with Derek, continued to bully me for as long as they could. Then finally Derek went away to college, and I felt like I could breathe a sigh of relief. my dad would still be around, but he was significantly less annoying to deal with when the other jerk wasn't with him. But before I could find out what it was like to live with my parents without Derek constantly picking on me, my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer. It was incredibly difficult for us to come to terms with it because we felt like our world had shattered. The only thing that my father and I had in common was that both of us loved our mother dearly. So her diagnosis really broke us both. But instead of making our family stronger, my dad decided that he was going to make the worst of this. My mother was already suffering, but now instead of my father and I putting up a brave front for her, he started distancing himself from her even more. Earlier, he would at least speak to me, even if it was to take digs at me. But after my mom's diagnosis, he stopped doing even that and started pretending like I didn't exist at all. I can cut him some slack for that because both of us were suffering, and he just chose to deal with the suffering in a different way. I would have preferred if my mom's predicament brought us closer together somehow, but clearly that was not meant to be. And even if it was meant to be, my dad was the kind of person who would make sure that it didn't happen, because for some reason he just hated me and couldn't bear the thought of me being happy. With time, my mom's condition only got worse, and my dad's temper also started taking a toll on me, because he would either not speak to me at all and ignore me completely, or he would be absolutely nasty to me. There were several occasions where he almost made me cry because of how rude he was being. I tried my best to keep the peace of the family by not responding to my father, because I knew that it would just give him more of a reason to berate me and pick on me. For the years that my mother was sick, whenever Derek would come back home from college, he would lay off of me, and I appreciated that. He would not be nice to me, but he would at least be human. And that's more than what I could ask for. Things were bad when my mother was still around, but after she passed away, I went from the frying pan into the fire. For the first couple of months after my mother's passing, things were really quiet around the house. And by that I mean that I would do all the work while my dad was just unresponsive. He would function. He would go to work, come back and have dinner and stuff, but nothing else. I was kind of concerned for him, and I contacted my grandparents several times to tell them that I thought my father was probably depressed, but they didn't take me seriously. They either didn't care enough about their son to check up on him after the funeral, or they just didn't like me just like my father and didn't want to do as I said. But after a few months had passed, my father started coming to his normal self. Unfortunately, that also included binge drinking and making me feel like crap about myself yet again. He would constantly order me to do stuff around the house, and it was really tiring because not only was I going to school, but I was also doing all the work around the house which my mother used to do earlier. Even when she was sick, my dad and I would manage to get all the work done, but after her passing, all that responsibility came to me. I couldn't even protest because if I did, my father would tell me that I wasn't bringing home any money, so this was the least that I could do to live here. It was really insulting, but I had nowhere else to go, so I just had to suck it up and deal with it. For the longest time, the only thing that I was looking forward to was going to college, because that would mean that I would finally be rid of my father and I wouldn't have to come back home anyway. I didn't even consider this place home anymore, because once my mom was gone, it stopped being home for me. Now I could have moved out and started living with my mom's parents after her, but they live really far away, and I still had a year of school left, so that was not an option for me. But then a couple of months ago, when my father found out that his golden child would be coming back home, he kicked me out anyway, and I ended up moving to live with my grandparents. Derek had moved out for college a couple of years ago, but he hadn't returned to live here after that. After he had graduated, he got a job there and decided to stay because his girlfriend wanted to stay there and make a life for themselves away from home. So Derek decided to stay there with her and would only come back for the holidays occasionally. About 2 years ago, he got married to his girlfriend because she was pregnant. They had just graduated when they found out, and it seemed like pretty perfect timing, so they decided to get hitched. I was invited to the wedding, surprisingly, and just for that one day, he did not terrorize me. My mother was also present there in spite of her condition, because even though he didn't like me, everybody liked my mom. And he wasn't particularly close to his own mother since she was kind of a bad mom. And I'm saying this because she was the kind of mother who just didn't care about their kid or having a relationship with their child. The woman was already in her 4th marriage by the time Derek got married, and it honestly appeared to me that her goal in life was to be rich. She worked and earned her own money, no doubt, but that was at the cost of her relationship with her son. I guess that explains why Derek was so attached to our father. He pretty much only had one parent who cared about him, and of course he didn't want to share that parent with me. Anyway, Dad got married, and soon after he had a kid as well. They have been living happily there for the past 2 years, but I don't know why. For some reason, 6 months ago, they decided to move back. My dad just informed me about it like 2 weeks before Derek was supposed to come home. He was really smug about it as well. He sat me down one day and told me that I needed to find a place to live because Derek would be coming back home and I had to give up my room. We had 3 bedrooms, so I asked him why they couldn't just use the guest room. He told me that Derek and his wife were going to live in the guest room and they were going to use my room as the nursery. It was apparently imperative that I leave the house because I was already enough since I was going to be an adult in just a few months. I thought it was really unnecessary and selfish of my father to demand that I leave the house altogether just because he wanted to move back here with his family. I tried to fight with my father, but there was no talking to him because he had already made up his mind. He told me that I had 2 weeks to clear out, and after that, if I didn't leave, then he would call the cops on me. Now, I am aware that there must have been some legal way to fight this and prevent it from happening, but at the time, it didn't occur to me, and I was really panic-stricken because I didn't trust my father, and I knew that he was fully capable of kicking me out without notice. So I started rushing to find a place for myself, but eventually, I settled on moving in with my grandparents. I had avoided doing that so far because they lived so far away, and I still had to go to school, but at the time, I just didn't have any other options. There were just a couple of weeks of high school left at that point anyway, so I was willing to take that risk. Within days, I had moved out because I didn't want to be there when Derek came back home with his wife and child. My father didn't seem to care when I moved out, and didn't even say goodbye to me the day that I had packed up and was leaving with the movers. My grandparents had come all the way to pick me up in their truck, and they had half a mind to tear into my father, but I told them not to do it because it just wasn't worth the drama. 6 months have passed since that day, and I have been living with my grandparents. I haven't been in touch with my father ever since he kicked me out, and I didn't plan on getting back in touch with him either. I was supposed to start college in a couple of weeks, and that was already going to be taken care of. I had literally no incentive to speak to my dad or Derek ever again. But unfortunately, they were the ones who had to reach out to me because something had happened, and they now needed me to bail them out. They visited me a couple of days ago, and I was quite surprised, because I hadn't been expecting them to reach out to me at any point. But my grandparents still let them in, and I decided to have a conversation with them because they seemed pretty desperate. I found out that apparently the reason Derek had come back here with his family was because he had lost his job earlier and was struggling to make rent. So he made the difficult choice of coming back here. His wife was all right with it because she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and didn't want to work until their kid was a little older. So this was their best bet. When they came back, they expected to find work easily. But that was not the case, because literally none of the companies around were hiring right now, and people with Derek's skill set were extremely common, so it wasn't as if he was a standout candidate either. But somehow, my father managed to get him a job in the company that he works in. Neither of them was happy about it because it paid a little less than what Derek used to make before, but that was all they had, so they had to make the best of their situation. But as it turns out, Derek had been stealing from the company for a couple of months now, and it had finally come to light a few weeks ago. Now, my father and Derek are both in trouble because their employers think that they were in cahoots and are threatening to file a lawsuit against them if they don't return the money soon enough. The only reason that they haven't been sued yet is because it's a family business, and the CEO of the company used to be a great friend of my mom's. It's only out of respect for her that he hasn't filed a lawsuit against them yet for embezzlement. But he's not going to hold out for longer. My father and Derek wanted me to help them out. They wanted me to claim that they needed the money for my college fund, which is why they had been stealing, and that it was not for their own personal gain. My father believed that this would make him take it easy on us and buy them some time to return the money. They would still get fired, but at least they wouldn't end up going to prison because of this. They were counting on me to help them out and paint the perfect picture of being a poor little victim. I couldn't believe that they had the audacity to ask something like this of me after the way they had treated me their entire life. I said no almost instantly, without even considering it, because it was a crazy idea and I was pretty sure that it was not going to work. Their plan was simply ridiculous, and I didn't want to be a part of it. When I told them that I didn't want to be a part of their plan, they started getting really agitated and told me that I had to help them out because there was a very real chance that they might end up going to jail, and I couldn't let some petty grudge from years ago ruin their lives. So I told them that it wasn't a petty grudge, and it certainly wasn't from years ago. My father had only recently kicked me out, and it hadn't even been a year since then, so I would say that it was pretty recent, but that wasn't even the main reason that I didn't want to help them. I just thought that their plan was really dishonest. I actually happened to know the guy that my dad worked for. Like I said, my mother and he were really good friends, and he also seemed to like me. He and my mother had pretty much grown up together, and I used to refer to him as my uncle whenever he would come around when my mom was still alive. Even at her funeral, we had a nice conversation, and we liked each other. My mom was actually the one who had told him to give my father a job in his company when my dad had been struggling. But instead of being thankful, not only had Derek decided to try and make a fool out of these people, but my dad was now trying to cover it all up and use me as a shield. I thought that it was really low, and I couldn't in good conscience be a part of this. So I told them that it would be in their best interest if they just tried to pay off whatever amount they had stolen, instead of trying to cover it up with more lies and stuff, because I wasn't going to be on their side here. They might end up going to jail if they tried to fool him again. In fact, they should even have been grateful that they were being given a chance to pay that money off and get out of this without a lawsuit that they would most definitely lose, and that would ruin their future, because they would definitely go to jail for it. They had no idea just how easy things were for them right now, and exactly how complicated they could become if they decided to go through with their crazy plan. I tried to explain it to them, but my dad got really mad and said that he wasn't here to listen to a sermon from me, and if I wanted to help them, then I would agree to their plan instead of giving them advice that meant absolutely nothing. So I told him that I wasn't going to be a part of this. To my surprise, my dad actually started crying. I had never seen this happen before, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. He told me that he had been counting on me because I was his son at the end of the day, and no matter what had happened in the past, he knew that he would have helped me out if I was in a situation like this. He said that he expected the same of me because this was a huge deal, and he really didn't want to go to prison. Derek also had the same sentiment, and he was begging me to help them out because he knew that I was well-liked among my mom's friends, and I was the only one who could bail them out. My mom would have made this much easier, but since she was gone, I was the next best person to deal with it, and they were banking on me. It was difficult, but I still had to turn them down, and I tried to encourage them to just come clean and repay the money that they owed. They got really upset and said that the only reason I was screwing them over was because they used to mess with me when I was little, and they were really disappointed with how I was dealing with things now. They left after that, but I keep thinking about it, and the guilt is eating away at me because I keep imagining them in jail, and I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. But at the same time, I don't want to be a part of something illegal and so immoral. It would be an insult to my mother as well, because I would technically be using her friendship and manipulating a really good friend of hers. I'm really conflicted right now about what I should do, and time is of the essence at the moment, because it's not like my dad and Derek have forever to pay off their debts. So I don't know if I'm wrong for not wanting to lie and cover up for my dad and my half-brother who bullied me my entire life. Update 1. I've made a decision, and I think I'm going to stick to not helping them out. Not only is it immoral and unethical, it's just straight up illegal, and I don't want to be a part of something like this. So if my dad and Derek want to stay out of jail, then they will just have to sort this one out for themselves. And it's not even like they are in some grave danger. They have been given the opportunity to set things straight, repay all the money that Derek stole, and get out of this without tarnishing their reputation. They can choose to return all the money and fix this for themselves. So I have no reason to feel guilty. Most of the comments here suggested that I stay out of this, not just because my father and Derek were terrible people, but also because what they were doing was really horrible, and I wouldn't be able to have this on my conscience and move on with it like they would be able to. It's clear that we are not made of the same stuff, and I would not want to do something like this. So that's why I have chosen to stay out of it, and if they contact me after this, I will block them. For the record, they are already blocked everywhere. But I'm sure that they might use some different numbers or social media accounts to get to me. My grandparents also think that I'm doing the right thing by staying out of this because this is a mess that they made, so now they have to clean it up. It doesn't make sense to expect anything of me after the way they treated me for so long. Update 2. Hi. So my father reached out to me today through text, just like I had expected. It's been 8 days since he visited me last, and we haven't spoken since then. As I had said, he used a different number that I wouldn't recognize to call me, and I absent-mindedly answered the call as well. The second that I picked up the call, I hung up when I heard my father's voice on the other end. But I was a little too slow in blocking him, so he was able to text me, and I received the text as well. He messaged me saying that he knew that I didn't want to discuss this any further, but he and Derek were in huge trouble and really needed me to help him out because their employer was breathing down their neck and threatening them every single day to return the money, or else he would file a lawsuit against them. It made me feel very guilty, but I texted him back and told him that I wouldn't be helping him, and he really should start looking for other ways to return the money instead of running away from the problem. Then I blocked him, and I hope that he understands where I'm coming from. Even if he doesn't understand it, I just hope that he does the right thing. I would hate to have a father in prison. Update 3. Hey, so I haven't heard back from my father yet, but my grandparents told me that they had got in touch with my mom's friend, the CEO, to ask him what he was planning to do. We hadn't contacted him before because he's a busy man and we didn't want to try too hard, but we needed to know what was going on, and speaking to my father or Derek was not an option anymore. So my grandpa spoke to him, and he told us that he was still planning on filing a lawsuit if he didn't receive the money back in a couple of months. He told us that he was willing to let it all pass because of his friendship with my mother, but he couldn't forgive the debt. And honestly, I respected that. He was being way more lenient than most people would have been in a situation like this. He even apologized to me and told me that he was sorry that this was happening to me, but I told him that it was no big deal since I don't even live with my father anymore, and he kind of deserves this. So we don't know what is going to happen, but I think my dad is clever enough to know that he should really pay the amount back somehow so he doesn't end up in jail. It's going to take a while, but I'm sure that they'll do it, and I have nothing to worry about. I also had a long chat with my mom's friend, and he told me that my mother had spoken to him before she passed away and said that if I ever wanted to intern somewhere for some quick cash, or maybe if I just wanted a job in general, his door would always be open. So that's nice to know, and I'll keep that in mind going forward.